She didn't know I was watching, not that night, not during the week leading up to it, not even the month before when I first started suspecting, or rather, knowing. There's a difference between suspicion and certainty. Suspicion makes you paranoid. Certainty makes you quiet, dangerous, focused. I hadn't spoken to anyone in 6 days. I took off work, told them I had migraines. I didn't. I just needed silence to think, to plan. I hadn't eaten a real meal in 3, just string cheese and dry cereal. I hadn't changed clothes either. Same hoodie, same socks, same bruised pride sitting with me like a roommate I didn't invite. And tonight was the night, because I knew where she would be. I'd known for weeks. She always met him on Thursdays. Always that bar, Grady's Hollow, the one with the cracked mirror behind the bar and the soft yellow lighting that made everyone look prettier than they really were. She thought I didn't know. She was wrong. Let me be clear. This isn't a revenge story. Not in the way you think. I didn't go there to cause a scene or throw drinks or punch the guy out. I'm not that type. I bruise easy and cry at movies. That's not me. What I did was worse. I chose a gesture. I sent her an engagement ring while she was sitting across from him. Not in person. No dramatic proposal. No big speech. Number. I had it delivered by a rideshare courier in a tiny velvet box with a handwritten note that said only, "I hope he's worth it." No name, no explanation. Just that. And the ring. The real ring. The one I spent 3 months paying off. The one I designed with her initials carved inside the band. The one that sat in my desk drawer while I rehearsed what I'd say, over and over, like a lunatic in love. I watched from across the street, hidden inside my parked car with fogged-up windows and a heart that wouldn't slow down. And then, it happened. She opened it. I could tell the moment the box reached their table. The courier pointed at her. She nodded like she was confused, then smiled politely, opened the box, and her whole face dropped, like someone had pulled the floor out from under her. He leaned over to look. She slammed it shut. He asked something. I could see it in his eyebrows, in the way his hands raised just a little. She shook her head, said something sharp. Then she looked around, eyes scanning the bar, the windows, the street. She stood up. She looked terrified, or guilty, or both. And for the first time in 2 years, she looked exactly like how I felt every time I knew she was lying. That's not the crazy part. The crazy part is what she did after she found the note hidden under the velvet. Because whatever she told him, whatever story she made up to explain the ring, it didn't stop what was coming. And trust me, it gets darker from here. Camille didn't move for a full 10 seconds after she opened it. From the angle I was sitting, I couldn't see her eyes, but I saw her hands. And they were shaking. That part I noticed. She wasn't the kind of woman who shook. She was the one who made others unravel. But now, even the way she held the box was awkward, like it had burned her fingers, and she didn't want the guy across from her to notice. Of course, he noticed. He reached for the ring. She pulled it back like it was a loaded gun. Then she looked around again, slower this time, like she was scanning for snipers. She didn't know it, but she looked exactly at my car. Not once, but twice. That's when I saw the shift in her. She smiled so convincingly it almost fooled me. She handed the ring to the guy, said something, and they both started laughing again. But it wasn't the same laugh. It was forced. She tucked the box into her purse, stood up to go to the bathroom, or at least that's what she wanted him to believe, and left her phone face down on the table. I knew what was coming. And I was ready. Because that wasn't the only thing I'd put in the box. Taped underneath the velvet cushion was a flash drive. And on that flash drive, a 2-minute audio clip of her, gasping, saying things no fiancé should say to someone who isn't her partner. Recorded, not by me, but by mistake, left in a voice note she accidentally sent to her sister during one of her yoga retreats. Her sister, for the record, had immediately forwarded it to me with a 2-word message. You deserve better. I saved it, not because I'm cruel, but because when someone burns your house down while you're still sleeping inside, you keep a piece of ash just to remind yourself it really happened. Now it was with her, sitting in her purse, a digital grenade, and it was ticking. When she stepped outside, she didn't call me. She didn't even try to text. Instead, she pulled out her phone and dialed someone. Not the guy at the table, not me, her sister. Her pacing was erratic. Her voice was sharp, aggressive. I couldn't hear the words, but I knew the tone. Desperation soaked into every movement. She wasn't acting. She was afraid, not because of what was on the drive, but because she didn't know what else I had. And that was the point. What Camille didn't know, what no one knew, was that I wasn't planning to expose her. I wasn't going to upload anything, humiliate her publicly, or burn everything down. What I wanted was much simpler. I wanted her to live with it, to feel it. Not just the guilt, but the anticipation of collapse. I wanted her to wonder if every tap on the shoulder meant her world was unraveling. I wanted her to live in the shadow of a reveal that may never come. Because that's what I've been doing for months. Now it was her turn, and it was just getting started. By the time Camille re-entered the bar, her smile had collapsed into something colder. The kind of smile people wear at funerals for people they didn't really like. Her drink was still on the table. So was he, the man she'd been seeing behind my back. He looked confused, maybe a little annoyed. I watched as she sat back down and leaned across the table. She said something with a fake chuckle, touched his wrist, then slid her hand across the table to hold his. A move so calculated it nearly made me laugh out loud from inside the car. She was spiraling. I could feel it from 30 feet away. But here's the thing. I hadn't even begun. Camille didn't know that in the days leading up to this, I'd spoken to two people she'd sworn would never speak to me again. Her ex-best friend Lana and her father, of all people. Both of whom she hadn't seen in years. Both of whom had a few very specific things to say. Lana, for starters, had screenshots. Apparently Camille had a pattern. I wasn't the first long-term partner she'd kept on the leash while testing new flavors. There was a man named Rob in 2021, a woman named Mika before that. Both ended the same way. Unexplained disappearances, sudden breakups, or, in Rob's case, a car with all his clothes thrown into the street in garbage bags. I asked Lana why she was telling me all this. She said she liked my poetry. I once published a chapbook Camille never read, and that Camille only respects people after they have ruined her. A sentence that stuck with me like gum under a table, ugly but permanent. Her father, that was another level. He didn't speak much, but what he said was chilling. If she's doing this to you, don't confront her. She breaks things on the way out. I didn't fully understand what that meant until later, but I trusted it. So I didn't text her, I didn't call, I didn't even post on socials. I went completely dark, which, for someone like me, someone who over-explains, who overthinks, who wants to sit down and process everything together, was practically war. Because she would interpret silence as danger, she'd expect rage, tears, explanations, ultimatums. But silence? Silence is what scares manipulators the most. Silence means you don't know what the other person knows. Silence means they could be talking to anyone. Silence means you have lost the narrative. So I watched her, not just that night, but for the next 5 days. She tried texting me twice. Short messages. Hey, can we talk? I just need to explain something. She didn't call, didn't show up at my apartment. I think she was waiting for me to explode first, to lash out so she could wear the victim's skin, like she always had in the past. But I didn't. I stayed silent. Until the envelope arrived. And this is where things took a turn even I didn't expect. Because inside that envelope, the one left in my mailbox without postage, which meant she'd been at my door without knocking, wasn't a letter. It was a photograph. A printed photo of her and me, taken almost 2 years ago. We were lying on the grass at Deer Park, tangled in each other, laughing so hard my eyes were shut. Someone must have taken it from a distance. It wasn't staged. It was real. And on the back, in ink, you didn't have to go this far. Nothing else? No signature. Just that. And suddenly, I realized she wasn't scared of what I might do. She was scared of what I already had done. And she was right to be. Because the drive, that was just a warning shot. What she didn't know was that her new boyfriend, bleach blonde, smug smiling, whiskey sipping Oliver, wasn't exactly who she thought he was. And that, I promise you, is a revelation you won't see coming. The message came on a Tuesday night, tucked between spam emails and a receipt from a grocery store I hadn't stepped into in weeks. The subject line read, "We need to talk." It's about her. No name, no attachments. Just a body of text that started in lowercase like the sender didn't want to appear aggressive, and ended with a phone number I didn't recognize. It was from him, Oliver, the bleach blonde guy across the booth. The man I thought was just another fleeting mistake in Camille's lifelong catalog of distractions. But he wasn't. and what he had to say would take everything I thought I knew and grind it into dust. I stared at the email for hours. I didn't reply. I didn't block him either. I just let it sit there, vibrating in the back of my mind like a tuning fork I couldn't shut off. Something about it didn't feel right. Not dangerous, just unfinished. Around 2:40 a.m., I caved. I texted the number, one word, talk. He called in 30 seconds. No pleasantries, no introductions, just a quiet voice deeper than I expected, and calm in a way that made me instantly suspicious. "Listen," he said, "I'm not trying to get in the middle of whatever this is. I didn't even know she was engaged. Hell, I didn't even know your name until 2 days ago." My chest went cold. "She told me you were just some guy she used to live with," he continued. "It said you were obsessed, controlling, said you threatened her when she broke it off." I didn't speak. I let the silence settle like ash. It wasn't the first time I'd been cast as the villain in her story, but hearing it from the mouth of the man she'd replaced me with, that added a new shade of betrayal. He exhaled. "But I didn't believe her. Not after last Thursday. Not after the ring." I asked him what he meant. He paused, like he was choosing between two doors in his mind, one that led to exposure, the other to self-preservation. "She panicked," he said finally. "She went into the bathroom and called someone. I don't know who, but when she came back, she told me she needed to take care of something, said I should leave, and when I didn't, she snapped, said some things that didn't make sense." "Like what?" I asked, my voice tight. "Like how you were going to flip the narrative, how you were dangerous if cornered, how you ruin people quietly." I didn't even know what that meant, but the way she said it, it wasn't fear. It was respect. "She's scared of what you might still have." I smiled. Not because I was proud, but because I realized I wasn't the only one living under Camille's mask. But then he said something I wasn't ready for. "She did the same thing to me, a year ago, before she ghosted." I froze. "She was dating me back then too, just for a few weeks. Then she vanished. No explanation. Said she was leaving town. Then I saw her with you months later, and I figured maybe I was just the side character. So I let it go. But when she showed back up 2 months ago, she acted like none of it happened, just picked up like it was new, like we were new." I didn't know what to say. He wasn't lying. I could hear it in the weight of his voice, the way he chewed on shame like it had teeth. "She keeps cycling people," he added. "It's like she doesn't end things. She just leaves doors open and walks through whichever one's most convenient." Now I understood why Lana had said Camille only respects people after they've ruined her, because she didn't end relationships. She archived them, like files. Labeled, but never deleted. She'd built a web, and I'd only just realized I wasn't at the center of it. I was one thread among dozens. And then Oliver said something I didn't expect. "Look, I'm not asking you for anything. I'm just telling you so you know you're not crazy. But one more thing. She's planning something." "What do you mean?" I asked. "She asked me where you live." That stopped everything. My blood stopped moving. My hands tightened around the phone. She hadn't been by my apartment since the ring, at least not that I saw. Unless the photo. She had been there. She'd left the envelope without knocking, and now she was asking strangers where I slept at night. This wasn't fear anymore. This was control, and I suddenly realized this wasn't about guilt. Camille wasn't scared I'd expose her. She was scared I'd take away the one thing she couldn't survive without, her version of the story. She was going to try and rewrite it, maybe with tears, maybe with threats, maybe even with something worse. And I wasn't going to let her, because now I had one thing she didn't: proof. And it was time to use it. She came to my apartment on a Thursday afternoon, midday, bright sun, the kind of harmless lighting people associate with lunch breaks and grocery runs. The kind of day you'd never expect someone to show up at your door to rewrite the past. I was upstairs, sorting through a drawer of receipts, trying to figure out what, if anything, I could discard from my old life. The buzzer rang once, then again, then 3 short taps that sounded like she knew the timing would irritate me. I didn't answer right away. I looked through the peephole first. It was her, hair down, sunglasses on. No makeup, which meant she was trying to look real. Camille only showed up barefaced when she wanted to look like the truth. I opened the door halfway, kept the chain on. We stared at each other for a few seconds in silence. She didn't smile. Neither did I. "Can we talk?" she asked. I didn't move, just looked at her. "I think we've had enough conversations," I said flatly. She glanced down the hall, lowered her voice, leaned in like someone might be watching. "Not like this," she whispered. "Please, just 5 minutes." I didn't want to let her in, but I also didn't want her standing outside my door like some ghost of good intentions. So I unlatched the chain and stepped aside. She walked in like she remembered every corner, didn't ask permission, just slid her hand across the wall to find the light switch, then paused when she saw the coffee table, because on it was the flash drive, the same one that had been hidden in the ring box. She looked at it, then at me. "You didn't tell him, did you?" she asked. "You'll have to be more specific," I replied. "There's a growing list of hims lately." She rolled her eyes, but I caught the flicker of anxiety behind them. She hadn't expected me to be calm. She expected anger, heartbreak, begging. But what scared her most was this: stillness. "I didn't come to fight," she said. "I just want to explain." I sat down, not because I wanted to listen, but because I wanted her to speak long enough to trip over her own logic. Camille had a habit of rehearsing stories in her head, but improvising endings. That's where the lies usually slipped out. She started softly, like she was narrating a trauma she'd just recently survived. "I know you think I'm the villain in all this," she said. "And maybe I am, but you didn't see what I was going through. I felt trapped, smothered. I couldn't breathe. You wanted a future I wasn't sure I believed in. And when I tried to tell you, you wouldn't hear it. So, yes, I pulled away. And yes, I met someone else. But that wasn't the plan. It just happened." She paused, waited for me to react. I didn't. She sat down across from me and continued. "I didn't want to hurt you, Eldon. I never meant to. But when you sent that ring, with that note, you changed something. You made it public. You made me look like a monster." "You made yourself look like that," I said. "I just stopped hiding it." She didn't like that. Her jaw twitched. She crossed her legs and started tapping her heel, the way she always did when she was getting defensive. But then she said something that flipped the table entirely. "I know what you're doing," she said slowly. "And I know who you've been talking to." I said nothing. She leaned forward, voice low. "My father, Lana, Oliver, you think they're your allies? They're not. My father hasn't spoken to me in years because I refused to bankroll his third divorce. Lana slept with my ex and still blames me for telling his wife. And Oliver, he's been obsessed with me since I ghosted him. They'll tell you anything to get your attention." I stared at her, trying to find the lie. But what unsettled me wasn't that it could be true. It was that I'd never thought it might be. And then she took it one step further. "You're not some innocent in all this," she said. "You think you're the wounded one, but you watched me, tracked me, set up some kind of public humiliation stunt. That's not love, Eldon. That's control. You didn't want to propose. You wanted to trap me." I felt something rise in my chest. Not anger, not regret, clarity. Because in that moment, I finally understood the full scope of who she was. Camille didn't just break hearts. She rewrote history. She painted fire as warmth and trauma as misunderstanding. And now, cornered, she was weaponizing every ounce of narrative she had left. But I had something she didn't know. I had the letter. The one Oliver gave me the night after our call. A letter Camille had written to another man. Dated 3 weeks before I bought the ring. A man she'd told she was moving to Spain with. A man she promised to marry, as soon as the mess here is handled. I kept it in the drawer next to the couch. And I realized right then, I wasn't going to show it to her. Not yet. Let her spin. Let her convince herself the walls aren't closing in. Because when the collapse finally came, it wouldn't be with shouting or confrontation. It would be quiet, just like her betrayal. The next morning, I opened the door to someone I'd never seen before, but who somehow already knew my name. He didn't look like someone Camille would have crossed paths with. Not polished, not smug, not part of her perfume-clouded world. He was older, maybe early 50s, wiry build, short sleeves despite the October chill. His face was drawn, like it had folded in on itself too many times. And yet his eyes were unnervingly alert, like a man who never really sleeps. "Eldon Firth?" he asked. I nodded, hesitantly, gripping the inside of the door. He reached into the side pocket of his jacket and pulled out an envelope. Plain white, no markings, no return address. "She asked me to give you this. She said you'd know what it meant." I didn't take it right away. Who sent you? Doesn't matter, he replied. But I knew your father. My stomach dropped. My father's been dead for 6 years, I said sharply, instinctively stepping back. He nodded. I know, I served with him, Iraq, 1994. We weren't close, but he used to talk about you, said you were too kind for the world. I took the envelope slowly, still watching him. What does Camille have to do with my father? The man didn't blink. Not Camille. Now I was confused. He turned to leave. No further explanation, no dramatic exit line, just one sentence tossed over his shoulder. Whatever you think is going on, dig deeper. You've only seen the first layer. I closed the door, locked it twice, then sat on the floor like I'd forgotten how chairs worked. My brain was spinning. My father? Iraq? A stranger delivering cryptic messages about layers? I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, handwritten, slanted cursive, familiar in a way that made my chest tighten. It read, "You won't believe me now. Maybe you never will. But what happened between us wasn't just betrayal, it was survival. You think I'm the architect of this mess, but I was surviving one you already built and forgot. If you want answers, start with your mother's basement, the green trunk." C. I read it 5 times before I even breathed properly. My mother's basement, the green trunk. I hadn't been back to that house in over a year, not since the funeral. I'd helped her pack a few boxes and left the rest untouched. That green trunk had always been there, shoved under the old staircase, collecting dust. It used to be my father's, military grade, thick steel, padlocked when I was a kid. I thought it held old uniforms, medals, maybe letters. Nothing worth prying into. I never asked. Neither did my mother. Now I wasn't so sure. Because if Camille had seen that trunk, if she knew about it, then she'd been deeper inside my life than I realized. Deeper than I ever gave her credit for. And what terrified me more than her knowing what was inside was the possibility that I didn't. I called my mother that afternoon. We hadn't spoken since a fight last Christmas, when she told me she thought Camille was performative. I'd snapped at her, called her bitter. We hadn't patched things up. But I called anyway. She answered on the 3rd ring, said nothing when she saw my name on the caller ID. "Hi," I started. "I need to come by, just for a bit. I need to check something." A long pause. "You mean the trunk?" she said. It wasn't a question. My blood turned to glass. "Did Camille talk to you?" I asked slowly. "No," she said, "but I figured this day might come." I got in the car within 15 minutes. No shower, no coat, just keys and adrenaline. The entire drive I kept cycling through what could be inside. Was it something about my dad? An old affair? A scandal? A crime? Why did Camille know about it? Why now? It took all my restraint not to speed through town. When I pulled into my mother's driveway, she was already standing on the porch. She looked smaller than I remembered, her silver hair pulled back in a tight braid, arms crossed. She didn't wave, didn't smile. She simply turned and walked inside without a word. I followed her through the kitchen, past the dusty piano, down into the basement. The air smelled like mothballs and oil, that familiar childhood scent that used to feel like safety. And there it was. The green trunk, still in the shadows, still padlocked. But this time, the lock was open. I looked at her, confused. "I unlocked it a year ago," she said quietly. "Thought maybe one day you'd ask." I hesitated, crouched down, then lifted the heavy lid. Inside wasn't what I expected. There were no medals, no uniforms, no dusty dog tags or sepia-toned photos of soldiers in formation. There were only 2 things, a faded photograph and a letter. The photograph was of a young woman, not my mother, not anyone I recognized. She was standing in front of a trailer holding a baby. Behind her, scrawled across the metal siding in red paint, were the words, "He is not yours." The letter was addressed to my father, dated 1995, written by someone named Delia. It started, "You told me you buried the truth, but secrets rot in silence." My vision blurred, because the child in the photo, the one in the woman's arms, had my eyes. I didn't move for a long time after I saw the photo. I just sat there on the basement floor, legs folded like a child, staring at a frozen moment from almost 3 decades ago. The woman, Delia, had dark eyes, wide-set and defiant, like she knew the picture would someday matter. Her jaw was clenched. The baby on her hip was maybe 6 months old, chubby cheeks, one sock missing. But it was the eyes, that soft amber-green color that stared back at me like a memory I hadn't made yet. The exact same eyes I saw in the mirror every morning. I looked up at my mother, standing in the corner of the basement with her hands tucked under her arms like she was holding herself together. "Who is she?" I asked, voice brittle. She didn't answer right away. She sat down slowly, knees cracking, and stared across the room. Not at me, not at the photo, but at the wall, like she was trying to remember something without fully reliving it. "Your father met her when he was stationed in North Carolina," she said. "It was brief, stupid. He told me about it a year after you were born, said it was over, but then a letter came, from her." I held up the letter from the trunk. "This one?" She nodded. "He never opened it, said if it was important she'd call." "But she never did?" I asked. She gave a cold, tired smile. "Oh, she did. Once," I answered. She asked if I was Delia. When I told her I was his wife, she hung up. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, sharper than I meant to. My mother shrugged. "Because you were his son. You are his son. Biologically? I don't know. Emotionally? He raised you. He chose you. Sometimes that has to be enough." I didn't respond, because nothing I could say would be anything but accusation. Instead, I opened the letter. It was short, scrawled handwriting, ink faded. "You told me you buried the truth. But secrets rot in silence. He'll find out. Maybe not from me, maybe not for decades, but he'll look, eventually. He's too much like me to let it go. When he does, tell him I loved him. I just couldn't stay in the shadow of a lie." Delia, no last name, no address, just pain compressed into paper. I sat there with the photo and letter in my lap, and something occurred to me that hadn't before. Camille had sent me here. She had known about this, somehow. Not just the trunk, but what was inside. That changed everything. Because if she'd known about Delia, if she'd known about this, then her entire relationship with me wasn't just toxic or selfish or deceptive. It was calculated. But how? I stood up, heart racing, thoughts crashing into each other. If Camille had orchestrated this, it meant she had access to my past in ways I never gave her. It meant she'd done more than cheat. She'd studied me, used me, mapped my history like a blueprint, which meant there had to be a connection, something she never told me. I left my mother's house before dusk. She didn't ask me to stay. I think she knew I couldn't sit in that house another second. The silence was too loud. Too many unanswered questions echoing off the wallpaper. I drove aimlessly for an hour, thought about calling Oliver, thought about calling Lana, thought about calling Camille. I did none of those things. Instead, I drove to the university. I remembered Camille telling me once, offhand in passing, that she used to audit classes at the state college when she couldn't sleep. She said sitting in on someone else's passion made her forget her own chaos. I never thought anything of it. But I remembered that night because she mentioned a name, a professor she liked, someone who taught literature and Eastern philosophy, Dr. Ari Mendel. I parked outside the campus and looked up his department on my phone. Office hours, Wednesday and Friday, 3 to 5 p.m. It was Wednesday. I walked across the quad in a fog, heart pounding harder with every step. I didn't know what I was expecting, or if he'd even know her, but I needed answers, and this was the only lead I had left that hadn't been touched. I knocked twice on the door to room 417. It was open. Inside, a tall man with a weathered face and kind eyes looked up from a stack of printed essays. He blinked at me, curious but not unfriendly. "Can I help you?" he asked. I stepped inside slowly. "I'm sorry. I know this is weird. I'm trying to understand something. You used to have a student. Maybe not officially. Her name was Camille Ashcroft." His expression changed instantly. Not surprise, not discomfort. Something between the two, recognition and regret. He gestured for me to close the door. Then he said the words that froze me mid-step. "She wasn't a student," he said. "She was my niece." I sank into the chair across from him without even asking. My legs gave out. I don't know what shocked me more, the fact that Camille had never told me about this man, or the tone in his voice when he said her name. Flat, careful, like a man describing a fire that hadn't gone out. He leaned forward, folded his hands. I always wondered when someone would come looking. "Looking for what?" I asked. he sighed. For the real Camille. Dr. Mendel didn't rush. He took a breath, folded his hands on the desk, and began speaking like he'd been rehearsing the words for years, like the silence had finally become too heavy to carry alone. Camille was a child of chaos, he said. Her mother, my sister, was brilliant, unpredictable, dangerous in all the ways people confuse with charisma. I watched Camille grow up in that house. I saw how she learned to survive, and that survival became method. I sat there, stunned. You're not the first, he said. Not the first man she's woven into her world. Not the first to feel like you were the one finally holding the thread. But the thing is, Camille never lets anyone hold it. She keeps it wrapped around their throat, gently, like a lover's arm, until they stop noticing it's tightening. He wasn't cruel, he wasn't blaming me, but he wasn't sparing me either. She doesn't destroy people to hurt them, he said. She does it to keep herself from being known. Intimacy terrifies her. It always has. So she builds puzzles, gives people just enough truth to stay, then shatters the picture the moment they get too close. But why the trunk? I asked. Why my past? My father? What was the point? That was new, he said. She never used to reach that far. But lately, she's been unraveling. The performances have been getting longer, the audience smaller, the exits messier. I think she wanted someone to understand her fully. But the only way she knows how to be seen is by burning down the room. I walked out of that office into late golden light. The campus buzzed around me. Laughter, backpack zippers, leaves skittering across concrete. For a moment, I felt like I was floating through someone else's memory, like I wasn't real. But I was. I was more real than I'd been in years. That night, I didn't call Camille. I didn't block her. I didn't write her some righteous final text, or send the letter from the trunk, or confront her with any of it. I did something she never expected. I let it go. Not to protect her. She didn't need protection. But to finally protect myself. The months that followed were quieter than I imagined they'd be. No dramatic returns, no cryptic letters. Camille faded the same way a storm does after it's already flooded the street. You know it happened. You can still feel the damp in the carpet. But the sky forgets fast. I started going to therapy, real therapy. Not the kind where you sit for 2 sessions and say you're fine. The kind that makes you face the version of yourself you've let others define. I reconnected with Lana. She apologized for staying silent too long. I apologized for assuming people were either loyal or gone. Turns out most people are just scared, like I was. I also visited my mother more. We don't talk much about the letter or the photo. But sometimes I catch her staring at me when she thinks I'm not looking, like she's trying to solve a math problem that's missing a variable. But there's no resentment there, just quiet wonder. And the best part, I met someone, a woman named Maribel of all things. Quiet, dry humor, reads murder mysteries on the train. The first time we went out, she told me she once stole a bottle of perfume at 13 and felt guilty for 6 years. She laughed when she said it, but I knew she wasn't lying. That was how I knew she was different. Real love doesn't show up in grand performances. It doesn't trap you in riddles or punish you for guessing wrong. It comes in quiet truths, slow hours. 2 mugs of tea on a rainy morning, and no fear that you're being tested. I still have the ring. It sits in a drawer now, not hidden, not glorified, just there. A reminder that closure isn't always a door you slam shut. Sometimes it's just walking away before you burn down a house that was never yours to save. And sometimes, the best revenge is living a life where you never once have to wonder if you're being watched. Because now, I'm not. I'm seen. And this time, for real, I'm finally free.